Good afternoon or morning, everyone. It's September 26, 2019. I'm Eric. Welfare checks turn deadly. You might want to think twice before calling the cops. This comes from John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute. Now, most of you all, if not all of you, know how I feel about law enforcement. But this comes from a New York Times writer, Steven Silberman. Anyone who cares for someone with a developmental disability, as well as for a disabled people themselves, lives every day in fear that their behavior will be misconstrued as suspicious, intoxicated, or hostile by law enforcement. Think twice before you call the cops to carry out a welfare check on a loved one, especially if this individual is autistic, hearing impaired, mentally ill, elderly, suffering from dementia, disabled, or might have a condition that hinders their ability to understand, communicate, or immediately comply with an order, especially if you value that person's life. At a time when growing numbers of unarmed people are being shot and killed for just standing a certain way, or moving a certain way, or holding something, anything, that police could misinterpret to be a gun, or igniting some trigger-centric fear in a police officer's mind that has nothing to do with an actual threat to their safety. Even the most benign encounters with police can have fatal consequences. Unfortunately, police trained in the worst case scenarios and thus ready to shoot first and ask questions later, increasingly pose a risk to anyone undergoing a mental health crisis or with special needs whose disabilities may not be immediately apparent, or require more finesse than the typical freeze or I'll shoot tactics employed by America's police forces. Just recently, in fact, Gay Plack, a 57-year-old Virginia woman with bipolar disorder, was killed after two police officers sent to do a welfare check on her entered her home uninvited, wandered through the house shouting her name, kicked open her locked bedroom door, discovered the terrified woman hiding in a dark bathroom and wielding a small axe, and 4 seconds later she was shot in the stomach. 4 seconds. 4 seconds. Mississippi 1, Mississippi 2, Mississippi 3, Mississippi 4. So it took about that long after contact with this lady. Don't you think it should take a little longer for these individuals to decide on whether or not to use lethal force on an elder or near elderly woman? So that's all the time it took for the two police officers assigned to check on Plack to decide to use lethal force against her. Both cops opened fire on the woman. Rather than using non-lethal options, one cop had a taser, which he made no attempt to use, or attempting to de-escalate the situation. And of course, we see cops are the ones who almost always escalate the situation. The police chief demanded his officers' actions, the police chief defended his officers' actions, claiming they had no other option but to shoot the 5'4" woman with carpal tunnel syndrome, who had to quit her job at a framing shop because her hand was too weak to use the machine that cut the mats. This is what happens when you give police the power to act as a judge, the jury, and an executioner. Right? This is what happens when you indoctrinate the police into believing that their lives and their safety are paramount to anyone else's. Suddenly, everyone and everything else is a threat that must be neutralized or eliminated. So, there's a list, quite a long one, but disabled individuals make up a third to half of all people killed by law enforcement officers. Can you believe that? A third to half. You know what that makes them in my eyes? Cold-blooded murderers. And this is according to a study by the Ruderman Family Foundation, which reports that disabled individuals make up the majority of those killed in use of force cases that attract widespread attention. This is true. This is true both for cases deemed illegal or against policy, and for those in which officers are ultimately fully exonerated. Many more disabled civilians experience non-lethal violence and abuse at the hands of law enforcement officers. For instance, Nancy Schrock called 911 for help after her husband, Tom, who suffered with mental health issues, started stalking around the backyard, upending chairs and screaming about demons. Several times before, police had transported Tom to the hospital, where he was medicated and sent home after 72 hours. This time, Tom was tasered twice. He collapsed, lost consciousness, and died. In South Carolina, police tasered an 86-year-old grandfather, reportedly in the early stages of dementia, while he was jogging backward away from them. Now, this happened after Albert Chatfield led police on a car chase, running red lights and turning randomly. However, at the point that the police chose to shock the old man with electric charges, he was out of the car, on his feet, and outnumbered by officers much younger than him. In Georgia, campus police shot and killed a 21-year-old student who was suffering a mental health crisis. Scout Schultz was shot through the heart by campus police when he approached four of them late one night while holding a pocket knife, shouting, "Shoot me!" Although police may have feared for their lives, the blade was still in its closed position. In Oklahoma, police shot and killed a 35-year-old deaf man seen holding a 2-foot metal pipe on his front porch. He used the pipe to fend off stray dogs while walking. Despite the fact that witnesses warned police that Sanchez couldn't hear and thus comply with their shouted orders to drop the pipe and get on the ground, police shot the man when he was about 15 feet away from them. 15 feet away. In Maryland, Police moonlighting as security guards used extreme force to eject a 26-year-old man with Down syndrome and a low IQ from a movie theater after the man insisted on sitting through a second screening of a film. Autopsy results indicate that Ethan Saylor died from complications arising from asphyxiation, likely caused by a chokehold. In Florida, police armed with assault rifles fired 3 shots at 27-year-old nonverbal autistic man who was sitting on the ground playing with a toy truck. Police missed the autistic man and instead shot his behavioral therapist, Charles Kinsey, who had been trying to get him back to his group home. The therapist, bleeding from the gunshot wound, was then handcuffed and left lying face down on the ground for 20 minutes. In Texas, police handcuffed, tasered, and then used a baton to subdue a 7-year-old student who has severe ADHD and a mood disorder. Let me say that again, okay? In Texas, police handcuffed, tasered, and then used a baton to subdue a 7-year-old child. With school counselors otherwise occupied, school officials called police and the child's mother to assist after Yosio Lopez started banging his head on a wall. The police arrived first. New Mexico, police tasered, then opened fire on a 38-year-old homeless man who suffered from schizophrenia, all in an attempt to get James Boyd to leave a makeshift campsite. You remember this, don't you? You should. I covered it. Boyd's death provoked a wave of protest over heavy-handed law enforcement tactics. In Ohio, police forcibly subdued a 37-year-old bipolar woman wearing only a nightgown in near-freezing temperatures who was neither armed, violent, intoxicated, nor suspected of criminal activity. After being slammed onto the sidewalk, handcuffed, and left unconscious on the street, Tanisha Anderson died as a result of being restrained in a prone position. And in North Carolina, a state trooper shot and killed a 29-year-old deaf motorist after he failed to pull over during a traffic stop. Daniel K. Harris was shot after exiting his car, allegedly because the trooper feared he might be reaching for a weapon. Now, if any one of us were to behave in this reckless and criminal manner, we would be thrown in jail, and rightfully so. But for some reason, when you have state-sanctioned thugs running around with guns, tasers, and large groups of others like them, well, it's a different story. These cases, and the hundreds, if not thousands, more that go undocumented every year, speak to a crisis in policing when it comes to law enforcement's failure to adequately assess, de-escalate, and manage encounters with special needs or disabled individuals. And that's not just them either, it's everybody. While the research is relatively scant, what has been happening is telling. Over the course of 6 months, police shot and killed someone who was in a mental crisis every 36 hours. Among 124 police killings analyzed by the Washington Post in which mental illness appeared to be a factor, they were overwhelmingly men, more than half of them white. 9 in 10 were armed with some kind of weapon, and most died close to home. But there were also important distinctions, reports the Post. This group was more likely to wield a weapon less lethal than a firearm. 6 had a toy gun. 3 in 10 carried a blade, such as a knife or a machete, weapons that rarely prove deadly to police officers. According to data maintained by the FBI and other organizations, only 3 officers have been killed with an edged weapon in the past decade. Nearly a dozen of the mentally distraught people killed were military veterans, many of them suffering from PTSD as a result of their service, according to police or family members. So law enforcement and their tactics is more of a crisis than many of the things we hear about in the media being crisis, like the opiate crisis, for example. The U.S. Supreme Court, as might be expected, has thus far continued to immunize police against charges of wrongdoing when it comes to use of force against those with mental illness. In a 2015 ruling, the court declared that police could not be sued for forcing their way into a mentally ill woman's room at a group home and shooting her 5 times when she advanced on them with a knife. The justices did not address whether police must take special precautions when arresting mentally ill individuals. And if we go over here to the Free Thought Project, we can see yet another instance of cold-blooded murder by cops. Oh, come on. Oh, what the hell? I'll just let it take its course and go around, but as you can see here, people in power, senator behind child abuse reform, arrested for possessing and distributing child porn. Yep. Can you imagine? These people are responsible for supposedly protecting you, all including the senator. I had to move my ugly mug down here so I can access these arrows. No charges for cop who gunned down unarmed mentally ill man and his parents at Costco. Now, the article points out, as soon as I get there, if anyone other than an off-duty police officer had shot 3 unarmed civilians in a Costco, that person would be in jail and facing criminal charges for murder. But he was an officer, an off-duty officer. So he's immune to, murder charges, apparently. And then there's more. There's more. There's always more. Always more. If my computer will cooperate, that is. Yep. Okay. Meanwhile, they're going around and shutting down preschool's vegetable stand because of zoning violations. Well, there are thousands and thousands of rape kits that have been gone untested for God knows how long. A 24-year-old man leaving a music festival killed by 3 cops who all tasered him at the same time. But no charges will be filed against these guys because they're special. They're special because they wear black costume with shiny gold badge. They're special. No charges for cops who shot and killed a naked, unarmed teen. And it just goes on and on and on. Yeah. Dozen serving life in prison for weed as cops get no jail time for kidnapping and raping a teen. The priority is locking people up for drugs. Well, things like this get swept under the rug. And this is why you should never, ever give power to anyone. Because these people can come and kill you at any time, steal your property, and go home to their families at the end of the day. And no such thing should happen. They should not be going home to their families at the end of the day. Cop threatens to carry out mass shooting. Not red flagged. Not arrested. But, if Tom, Dick, or Harry were to make such a threat, well, they'll be red flagged and arrested, if not murdered in cold blood. This goes on and on and on. Every day, there's something in the alternative news, at least the alternative news sites that are not police sycophants. Family shocked to learn a 6-year-old girl arrested, cuffed, and booked into a jail for a tantrum at school. So, if anything in this country is a crisis, it is the amount of power that has been given to individuals with costumes and badges. It's not a mass shooting crisis. It's not a drug crisis. The people who die from drug overdoses, they go to a person willingly. No one forced them to buy the drug they overdosed on. Whereas the people who are being gunned down by police every day was not afforded the opportunity to choose. Anyway, I thought I would share this with you. I hope all of you have a great day, and until next time, kill the state before the state kills you.